Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch video, and today we're starting our mini-series looking at the different complications of watches, and today we're starting with the Moonphase. So as with all my reviews, I like to go back in time and look at the history behind whatever we're discussing. So this video is going to be no different. We're going to go back in time and really actually not look just at the Moonphase, but also look at where our calendar, our modern day calendar came from. Our modern day calendar really was born from observing the solar system and also looking at the Earth and seeing the changes in the Earth as a result in these changes in the solar system. So let's get into our calendar and break it down. So a year was judged by looking at the changes in seasons on Earth. And really that is just nature reacting to the different temperatures or changes in temperatures throughout a year due to the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. So that's generally how we measured a year, by looking at the different cycles of seasons. The next part that I want to talk about is a day, how we measure the cycle of day. Well, probably the biggest factor for days is the rising and the setting of the sun. And the reason why the sun rises and sets on the horizon of the Earth is because the Earth rotates or on its axis, therefore we see the sun at different times in our day. And also we could work out hours of the day and time from that as well. If you think about a sundial, that's an ancient piece of equipment, and it just takes into account the different positions of the sun relative to our sky, our horizon, and that takes into account roughly where we should be within that day. And then months have been observed from our moon, looking at the different phases of the moon. So whether it's a crescent moon, a full moon, and a new moon, etc., etc., that tells us really what stage of the lunar cycle we're in. And the lunar cycle is essentially when the moon orbits the Earth, which is 29.5 days, or just over 29.5 days. And of course, moons are what we want to talk about in this video. And the earliest form really of recording this information from the moon was actually 205 BC in ancient Greek times. And they used a very special piece of equipment that they built to actually measure not only the moon, but also much more than that, some real amazing observations within our solar system. And this artifact, in fact, was discovered in 1901, just off a Greek island. And that Greek island is called Antikythera. And this mechanism, this analog computer, was named the Antikythera mechanism. And basically it just observes or predicts actually observations in the solar cycle and the solar system. It was so complex and so ahead of its time that it could even predict when the different eclipses would occur in time as well. It was amazing, incredible piece of engineering, and it still remains kind of current even now, now in our 21st century. And the way it worked was basically that you would wind it and that would advance the hands and the time through time within the mechanism, the cogs, which would then display the information at different points within that year. But the most important thing that we really want to look at today is the moon phase, or the moon phases section of this Antikythera mechanism. And the moon phases were measured by having a little small ball painted half white and half black on the end of a stick, and the stick or hand would be centered in the middle of this dial, one of the sides of this Antikythera mechanism, and as it moves around the dial, which replicates days passing, the small end of the stick would spin and we'd see the moon at different phases, and that basically represents months passing or weeks passing as we see the moon spin round. Now skip a few years on to the 16th century. That's when the Germans and the English were creating grandfather clocks. And really this was the first time that a moon phase was displayed independently from all its other kind of astronomical observations like the sun, eclipses, etc. It was the first time that really people showed an interest in just looking at the moon phase on a clock. And the way that moon phase was displayed back then has remained pretty similar to how it's displayed now. Very little has changed. The only thing that really has changed is the way in which we actually depict the moon. Back then they used to paint a face on the moon, like a cherub face on the moon phase, and over the years that kind of face changed a little bit, and then around the 20th century is when we removed that face, and it was much more of a simple minimalistic moon and stars. That's kind of the standard pattern now for moon phase, kind of similar to what we see on this watch that we're looking at today. Certain brands will add real depth and detail to the moon phase on their watches, but generally the kind of simplest normal standard style is just a simple circle, a golden circle or whatever color it is, and then stars surrounding. It wasn't really until the 1920s that we saw the moon phase then move on to wristwatches. Prior to that, it was again grandfather clocks and also pocket watches. But it wasn't until 1925 really, which is when the most notable of those Moonphase wristwatches, which was a Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar. That really was the main, or kind of the one that started having watches with moon phases. And like I said before, the same style of displaying a moon phase on a watch was the same on the grandfather clocks from the 16th century as it is what was in the 20th century with the 1925 Petra Calendar from Patek Philippe, and it still remains the same now. And really that setup is a small disc with 2 moons on them and any stars you want to place in between. And then it's displayed underneath this kind of layered effect where you have the kind of northern hemisphere of the disc displayed, but it's hidden behind 2 bumps or 2 humps. It's also known as a bosom way of displaying the moon phase. And these 2 humps basically hide some of the moon as it moves through its phases. And when it gets to the center between the 2 bumps, you see a full moon. And then obviously as it moves behind the other side, you get hidden, and then the second moon comes out on the left side. So it's a really interesting way of displaying it, and it's definitely the most efficient and has remained the most efficient visual way of displaying the moon phases for a long, long time. The cycle of the moon, the lunar cycle, is 29.5 days, just over 29.5 days. So watches use cogs with 59 little teeth on them, and that is basically because each day is 2 clicks on the 2 teeth, therefore you divide that by 2 and you get 29.5 days. So that was the easiest way for them to make it into a mechanism. So that's why most watches will feature a dimple. When you're adjusting your moon phase, you have to advance the dimple or press the dimple in 2 times in order to advance one whole day, one 24-hour day. So let's have a look at a watch now with a moon phase. Today we have with us an Audemars Piguet Perpetual Calendar. I've reviewed this watch already, so please go and check that watch out, or that review out, because it's really, really in depth. It shows you how to set the whole watch and also the other features of this piece. But today we're just going to look at the moon phase on this watch. Now, to set the moon phase on this watch, the most important thing is to ensure that this watch is inside its safe zone. Most watches with a moon phase or a perpetual calendar or an annual calendar will have a safe zone, as when it's safe to set the correct the movement on that watch. Otherwise, you could risk damaging your movement. So we've ensured that it's within the safe zone on this watch before we adjust the moon phase. So using the little dimple on the side of the watch, we're just going to adjust and have a little play with the moon phase here, just so you can see how it moves. You can see that it requires 2 presses to move it on one 24-hour day, but one depress will move it on 12 hours, so you can see kind of a half-day movement of the moon there. Now we're going to set this watch, and in order to set a moon phase, there's a little bit of information that you need in order to set it correctly. There's a few ways of going about this, but the easiest way I find is to find out when the last full moon was. And the last full moon of this month was on the 19th of April, which is 5 days ago today. Today we're filming on the 24th of April, so therefore that's 5 days. So what we do is we get the moon in the center of those 2 bumps on the moon phase dial. And we have it centered there, so we see a full moon now, and now we move the moon on 5 days. In order to do that on this Audemars Piguet Perpetual Calendar, we have to press in the dimple on the side of the watch 10 times, because each day requires 2 presses. So today is the 24th, and now we can see that this watch is now correctly set for the 24th of April. This is the exact phase that the moon is in today, as we see it on this dial. And that concludes how to set a moon phase, and that concludes our look at the history of moon phases as well. Stay tuned for more videos in our complication series. We're going to be looking at loads of other different complications from some beautiful, beautiful watches that really are iconic for those complications. So stay tuned for our next video, and as always, if you're interested in any of the watches mentioned in this video, then please don't hesitate to contact us. Our details are in the description, and also at the end of this video, we'd be happy to call those watches into stock for you.